So, I was playing some Mario Kart 8 with some friends the other night, and I was losing.
All around me are familiar.
Like, a lot. I'm not very good at the game, but at least I was allowed to pick the next cup. As always for me, it had to be the Banana Cup. No, not because of Donut Plains 3. So close. So close. No, Banana Cup is my go because of Dry Desert, which has undoubtedly been my favorite track going back to when I was a kiddo. Originally from Mario Kart Double Dash in 2003 on the GameCube, I loved this desert biome. Biome? Am I saying that right? It would just be biome or biome? This desert place captured my imagination as a kid. Growing up, I was always one that loved the idea of traveling to exotic locales. And in a small way, the setting of this track gave me that same feeling of exploration, even if it was just a Mario Kart level. I always loved looking out into the distance to see the massive pyramids going up well into the sky. And there's those pharaohs at the track's opening watching over you, almost beckoning you to race through their archway. There are these giant obelisks pot-marking either side of the track, giving not only obstacles for the player, but that same sense of exploring ruins. But this time while I was playing, something struck me. Why pyramids? Why use actual landmarks? We're in a world of, Italian plumbers that are killing dinos and fantasy castles and flying ships, and then in the desert there is actual historical landmarks of actual cultures. And then I started thinking about how often they came up. I couldn't really remember playing a Mario game where the deserts didn't have some sort of pyramid, or sphinx, or obelisk, or some nod to Egypt. I started checking, and every game has this. I feel like some sort of weird conspiracy theorist with a thread on a corkboard. I just kept finding pyramids. If there's a desert, it's got a pyramid. Super Mario 64, pyramid. Super Mario 3, pyramids. Super Mario Galaxy, pyramid. Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, got 'em. Looking over all of these games, it became clear that these Egyptian desert levels were as a part of the Mario formula as any character or mechanic, probably in more iterations of the game than some characters, like a Toad or a Luigi, which is weird. Now you might be wondering, why Egyptian icons? This isn't how Mario levels are traditionally designed, or at least I should say, it's not how the rest of these Mario levels are designed. I'll use Mario 64 to demonstrate this. Usually the levels are based on some sort of naturally occurring biome, and there's sort of natural associations that pop out of that want to emulate a certain feeling or a certain idea about this biome. In many ways, they operate like genres. These levels have specific objects and color palettes and styles of platforming that are tied to these genres of levels. It's not always so hard and fast, but at least for specific types of levels, only certain things can be there, like looking at the lethal lava land. Lava, okay, makes sense. Metal, we got it, sort of smelting kind of thing, very basic, no cultures. It's just lava and metal, basically. Cool mountain. You got snow, you got some penguins, there's a vague cabin. Yeah, that's just kind of generic. We got it. Bob-omb's Battlefield. This is the beginning stage in most Mario games. It's just a grassy place, and oh look, we got bombs there. And then there's Shifting Sand Land. And we got the sand, so that makes sense. But at the center is again a pyramid. It takes center stage, is literally the biggest thing there. Instead of the biome dictating some kind of natural association, we have a very specific monumental architecture from one culture being used. Which I think if you're not questioning that, you might want to think more about why we so deeply associate the pyramids and Egyptian culture with deserts. Especially these deserts. The deserts in Mario games are not portrayals of a biome that is nice. All these have, especially in this specific level in the Shifting Sand Land, is just basically a wasteland, which is much of what these desert locations are effectively presenting. You're not getting here's all these wonderful characters, here's all this luscious greenery, which Egypt does have. It does have, grassy places. And I'm not trying to say that, somehow, the pyramids are not in the desert. And you look at the place around the pyramids, you're going to find something that looks vaguely referential to what you're seeing in these levels. But if we zoom out from these pictures that we see, this kind of fantasized image of the pyramids, Cairo, one of the biggest cities in the Middle East, is right there. This is a tourist trap. This idea of it being this lone, forgotten ruin is just basically marketing. The only other time this really happens is usually in service of fantasy, like the aforementioned bombs, or the flying boat, or those like rock monsters, or like things that just don't exist in any material way whatsoever. So they're not necessarily tied to any specific biome, though there are enemies that are. Now, what's interesting here is that the pyramid is one of the most recognizable icons of Egyptian culture, and when we connect it to this idea of a barren sand wasteland, or more broadly, just deserts in general, it may appear inconsequential at first, but that's not exactly a positive portrayal. One may argue that there are icons for distinct cultures other than like the castles and the dungeons that are situated around the Mushroom Kingdom, which one could point to as being European in style. But like, they aren't the Alhambra, or the Chateau Chambord, or the Windsor Castle. It's never specific. They are always clearly a very general fantasy castle. Like when we look at Peach's castle, I hope that no one's seeing like a austere European castle. That is clearly a like playset of what a medieval castle was like. When we look inside like Bowser's dungeons in the 2D games, these are effectively generic as a bad fantasy castle can get. But the pyramids and the sphinxes and the obelisks, these are pretty well and truly connected to Egyptian culture. And I think importantly here, this idea of them being generic, or this kind of vagueness that Mario is using, is kind of one of the defining features of what makes a Mario level, whether that be in the mainline games or its numerous spin-offs. It's just how utterly vague these locales are. They want to convey not necessarily a detailed world. They want to convey a feeling with images and design that is easily digestible. Clip art. When you look up like a snow mountain or a snowy area, you're gonna get something that pretty much looks like the cool mountain. Now, when we look back to the shifting sand level, the pyramid is not vague. The pyramids of Giza are clearly being portrayed here. We have obstacles that are wrapped in mummy rags. We have obelisks that are dotted about the map. Now, importantly, these images that we're looking at, these clip art ideas of Egypt, they are specific and they are a part of Egyptian iconography and culture, but they don't really tell us about the culture specifically. We're looking at an allusion to a feeling. And the reason why it's here is not because Nintendo is coming up with some new thing, and I hope I wasn't portraying it as they were coming up with some new association, some problematic association on their own. We generally feel like the desert is intrinsically tied to Egyptian culture, and we can see this. It's a great shorthand. Whether it be on Nintendo's earliest handheld or on the Switch, the pyramids tell us that this level is a desert. It's a shorthand, just like penguins in an ice level or bulky trees in a grassland level. The principal issue with this kind of portrayal is that it centralizes our conception of Egypt and the Egyptian people. It becomes not a culture, but a setting, a backdrop for us to act upon it, but it to never act. Is that positive to think about a culture by what it created thousands of years ago? Hold on to that thought. One of the most interesting things I found while combing through all these Mario games is that I noted that because of how self-referential the series is, the locales in many ways end up being as defining a part of what makes a Mario game as a Mario or a Bowser. That means that this connection that was made early on between Egyptian culture and the desert as a setting has been continually used over the long decades of Mario's history. It began to define and crystallize what it meant to play a Mario desert level. From this first appearance in Super Mario 2, it would become the norm going forward by Super Mario 3. A Mario desert level would need Egyptian culture to make it a Mario desert level going forward. This is epitomized with the new Super Mario Bros. Games that would reboot the 2D side-scroller in the mid-2000s. New Super Mario Bros. In 2007 on the DS would ultimately solidify the essence of what a Mario game was, and with it, this association with Egyptian iconography. This game was not a recreation of older games, but a kind of summarization of what a 2D Super Mario game was. Like it became its own version of clip art, of what Mario meant in the culture. Like if you search for Mario right now, that 2007 Mario, those decisions about what makes Mario Mario, that's who we think of. We don't think of the Super Mario World version of Mario, or we don't think of the Sunshine version of Mario, or the 8-bit version of Mario. The character and series was crystallized at that moment. And like the many examples I've described, its desert levels effectively were just higher-res versions of the same pyramids and Egyptian iconography. This also goes further in terms of the two games where players are given the reins to design their own Mario levels with Mario Maker 1 and 2, which again, these desert levels are defined with backgrounds that display large pyramids as backdrops. And often players themselves end up creating pyramids in these levels. So not only have the creators been sticking to this rulebook, the players themselves have come to identify these desert sand worlds as the place for Egyptian pyramids in Mario games. Nintendo and its developers are not making new problematic statements about the different cultures they are portraying. Instead, they are in many ways simply building their worlds with the basic ideas and images that come to mind when we think of these ideas and concepts. There's often an association with Odyssey and the Mario series in general that its worlds are timeless. To me, that feeling is not one of being timeless, but that instead it's simply giving you what you already know, what already feels right. In conclusion here, the fact that we have these clip art mental images about the world that lack nuance is not in of itself a failing. We all have to start from some basic, flawed understanding of a topic. A point of reference from where we can expand others' points of view, as well as have common spaces where others can progress, as well as have common spaces where we can start from and others can take us and help us deepen our knowledge about a topic. The problem is, these incomplete mental images are too often the only images most people will ever see. If you see Egyptian culture as just being something that's ruins, or a forgotten past, or just something that's in the desert that has very little meaning, I doubt you're going to think very much about the people that live there today. Especially if the image that came to mind when I was first talking about the pyramids was that mysterious, by itself, lonesome pyramids, instead of this image that's honestly much better, where we see people, actual people, and how they live their lives right next to their past. And importantly, they're living their present. Thanks for watching.